everybody, Jimmy Smith. I'm back home for the holidays at my mom's place for a little bit. So that's why you're seeing the Greek pictures behind me. She's Greek. Anyway, but I have my laptop. I don't have my normal microphone set up, so the audio is not going to be great. I'm in her study at the moment. So what I want to go over, by the way, happy holidays, happy new year. I have some birthdays today and tomorrow in the family, so it's a busy time for me. Anyway, so Fighter of the Year is what I want to talk about and go over. My pick for Fighter of the Year is pretty obvious. To me, it's Jorge Masvidal, but I want to go over what's important to me for Fighter of the Year and why I didn't choose the other contenders. The first major consideration to me about Fighter of the Year is how much of the success in the year is part of a streak that has been continuing through previous years. Meaning, was 2019 great, but was 2018 great and 2017 great? And 2019 is part of a larger streak in their career. A lot of the other contenders, Henry Cejudo would probably be number 2 on most people's lists for this year. Henry Cejudo beat Demetrius Johnson in 2018. He beat one of the greatest mixed martial artists of all time to win the 125-pound title. Does that diminish what he accomplished at 135 beating Marlon Moraes? No, not at all. Does it diminish his knockout win over TJ Dillashaw? No. But I think the biggest success of his career, certainly the biggest moment of his career, was a win over Demetrius Johnson. And that was in 2018. So in many ways, to me, 2019 was a continuation of a streak he was already on in late 2018. Now, did he accomplish a lot? Yes. And before everybody freaks out in the comment section, everyone you can think of and name for Fighter of the Year in 2019 had a great year. It's just, is it better than the other candidates, and why is this one candidate better? In many ways, that's how I feel about Henry Cejudo, that he was already on a great run. He was already doing great things at the start of 2019. In many ways, him not being Fighter of the Year in 2019 is kind of a compliment, in that he was already doing great stuff at the end of 2018. Jorge Masvidal was a guy who came into 2019 on a 2-fight losing streak, had been an up-and-down fighter. And what I think Jorge Masvidal doesn't get enough credit for is what he is accomplishing, what he's doing right now, at this stage in his career, is almost unheard of in professional athletics. He's 35 years old. He is a veteran of the sport with 48 fights, and he's doing some of his best work now. Rarely in sports, period, not just combat sports, do you see a fighter late in their career go on a statistical run and lead their team to greatness late in their career. Now, a lot of times we do see success from athletes late in their career. Tom Brady's a great example, but he was having success in his prime too. Drew Brees has been doing it his whole career. Peyton Manning did it his whole career. They did it late. They also did it early. Rarely do you see a so-so quarterback or a so-so basketball player suddenly go on a run at 35 and do great things. Now, in combat sports, MMA specifically, actually, MMA more than other combat sports, you can start late and peak late. People get into MMA typically later in life than most athletes in other sports. But we still see a peak early. We still see a prime set of years. A lot of times it's late 20s, early 30s, which is late for sports. But once that peak is over and that prime's over, we know what we got. Hardly ever do we see a resurgence late in a career. The only other example I can really think of, Chael Sonnen did it late. But one thing to keep in mind is Chael Sonnen's resurgence, the run-up to the Anderson Silva fight, the first one, happened late in his career. They were by decision. That's how he got there. And it came with a new character in his personality. Chael P. Sonnen, the American gangster, the most charmed, the biggest arms. That came with it. So it wasn't just based on his performances, which were solid. It was kind of this new attitude that he came out with. Masvidal didn't really do that. Masvidal has had basically the same attitude and I don't want to say shtick because he doesn't really have a shtick, but he has the same personality he's had his whole career. If you're old enough to have followed him, which I have, he isn't really behaving any differently. He's just fighting better and against better talent. And that's incredibly rare in combat sports. Longest streak of his career since he got to the level is 3 fights. And he's doing that right now. But this is a guy before 2019 was a win some, lose some guy at 55 and 70. Had some great wins, had some tough losses. If you showed me a list of contenders for Fighter of the Year at the end of 2018, and you said, okay, here are the list of people, of fighters that are going to be at the year-end list of 2019, Jorge Masvidal would be the last one I would pick. He would be the last person I would suspect, considering how 2018 ended, that he would have a Fighter of the Year streak in 2019, but that's exactly what he did. Now, what the funny thing about it, when I think about the streak he's on, is the one win I give him the most credit for is the one he got the least press for, the win over Darren Till. Partly because, and I did the same thing, and you still can, I thought Darren Till was ready for a letdown after the loss to Tyron Woodley. I think a lot of fighters, and I've talked about it before, have a down after a performance like that, and I thought that's what happened against Jorge Masvidal. So it was easy to kind of write off that win, but looking back on it, if you look at the Ben Askren win, flying knee, he put everything behind one shot and it landed. If that shot doesn't land, we might have a totally different fight. You don't know. Then he beats up Nate Diaz. Nate, an excellent fighter, incredibly entertaining, great fan base. I could go on and on about Nate, but not a contender currently certainly not at 170 pounds, and I don't think at 155 pounds right now, as deep as that division is. So it's very interesting in that the press and the credit and the money and the pay-per-views went up throughout this year for Jorge Masvidal, when I think the toughest fight he had and the best performance he had was the first one against Darren Till. So it's kind of like he ended on this huge high note. Suddenly he's a needle mover. Suddenly he's a pay-per-view seller. Suddenly he's in title contention with Kamaru Usman. I think that's the smartest fight they could make, and I'll discuss that in a second. So that's why I pick him as Fighter of the Year. And then in the beginning of the year, he was on a 2-fight losing streak. This is again, remember, he had a couple fights off, a couple years off as well, year and a half off. I wouldn't have suspected that at 35 he would suddenly have a fantastic year. So what makes this year exceptional for him and why he's Fighter of the Year is where he was at the start of the year. He was not in a great place, wasn't really on anyone's radar necessarily. Obviously a big fan base, but not anyone we expected to suddenly be a needle-moving pay-per-view guy. Now, the detractors will say, and they have every right to say this, he didn't fight for a title, didn't win a title. There are fighters we're looking at for Fighter of the Year who won multiples. Henry Cejudo added another belt to already being a champ at 125. Things like that. He wasn't in a title fight. He did not win a title. So to a lot of people that, I wouldn't say disqualifies him, but certainly it's certainly a consideration when you look at his year. In that we're talking about other fighters who are among all-time greats in their weight class. If you look at Amanda Nunes, for example, she is an all-time great. I would have put Colby Covington in the running for this, for sure, if he had beaten Kamaru Usman. He did not. One of the reasons that Kamaru Usman, as solid as he is, I think he's a great fighter, the issue for Colby Covington is how the year ended, first off, and secondly, to me, there's a little work being done in the house. That's the noise you're hearing. But one of the things about Colby Covington was he didn't have that busy of a year as well. That's one thing I looked at when I looked at Colby Covington's year. Not only did it obviously end on a down note, he lost the title fight, he didn't have a very busy year. He had the injury, he had some time off. So when you look at his performance in 2019 specifically, 2 fights, Robbie Lawler and Kamaru Usman. So yeah, he won a great fight against Robbie Lawler. Had he defeated Kamaru Usman, he might be near the top, but he didn't. So the impact he made on the sport in 2019 was big, but he didn't fight that much. Only 2 fights. So that, to me, keeps him out of the running. But when you look at Jorge Masvidal's year in that context of what'd you do in the bubble of this year, even when you talk about the other greats, they were on great streaks beforehand. They were doing great things leading into 2017. Jorge Masvidal kind of came out of nowhere and really shocked everybody. Now, him being in title contention with Kamaru Usman, I think is the smartest thing the UFC can do. And I'll tell you why. Because if you look at Chael Sonnen, who's one of the few people to do what Jorge Masvidal is doing right now, which is a late career resurgence, been at the top level for a long time, and is doing great things late in their career. If you look at Chael Sonnen, when he fought Anderson Silva, loses to Anderson Silva, then he beats Brian Stann and Michael Bisping. Loses to Anderson Silva, loses to John Jones, beats Shogun Rua, loses to Rashad Evans. Obviously had some PED issues out of the sport for a while. Came back to Bellator, lost to Tito Ortiz, 2-fight streak with Vanderlei Rampage, and then got blown up by Fedor, loses to Machida and retires. The UFC knows it doesn't take much for Masvidal, Chael Sonnen, someone this late in their career. Masvidal isn't adding new skills. He isn't a totally different fighter than he used to be. He's just having performances he didn't have before. You don't know when they're going to run into that fighter that's going to put them on a losing streak again. They lose a couple, and some of the shine is gone. This isn't a fighter who's in their physical prime. This isn't a fighter who is suddenly acquiring new skills, joined a new team, and there's a resurgence. He's with the same team he was before. He's a stand-up guy with really nice hands, and he's doing great things right now. That could go away very, very quickly, especially at 35 years old. There could be a cliff right around the corner. The UFC knows that. So what do? You maximize the value of this asset as soon as you can. Because it's at 170 pounds, which is not Jorge Masvidal's normal weight class, although he's had success at 170. It's taking on a wrestler in Kamaru Usman. It's taking on a guy with great hands who's doing great things right now. Really confident right now, especially in his power punching. So a loss doesn't wipe him out. There's still a lot of opportunities for him should he lose. And it's a big title fight, pay-per-view, main event type of thing that'll make a lot of money for everyone involved. Could the Conor McGregor fight be around the corner? Yes. Does a loss to Kamaru Usman kill that? No. I think if he loses to Kamaru Usman, which right now I would say he would be the underdog in that fight. I'll break it down if it ends up happening. A loss to Kamaru Usman, then he fights if he fights Conor McGregor, should he beat Donald Cerrone, that's still a big money fight. So putting him up against Kamaru Usman, win or lose, he takes on the winner of, let's say the winner of Cowboy versus McGregor, even though he's already beaten Cowboy. I'm just saying that for right now because we don't know who's going to win. Let's say for argument's sake, it's Conor McGregor, and that sets up another big money fight. The UFC is making a lot of money off a 35-year-old fighter. We don't know what's going to happen with him. We have to make big money fights now. I think they're going to do that. You strike while the iron's hot, and that's it. So I think the smartest thing they could do is a title fight against Kamaru Usman. Right now, the fans would want it. It would certainly sell. It would make everybody a lot of money. I think Kamaru Usman probably wins it, but it still doesn't derail a Conor McGregor, Jorge Masvidal BMF showdown. A lot of money all around. So I think the UFC is doing the right thing when it comes to guiding Jorge Masvidal at this point in his career. Because you never know, like with Chael Sonnen never really went on a great streak again. He had a two-fight streak with Brian Stann and Michael Bisping. That was it after that. Never won more than 2 fights in a row. So that could certainly happen with Masvidal. Strike while you can. So for those reasons, I think Jorge Masvidal is Fighter of the Year. Feel free to let me know what you think in the comment section. I'm sure it's going to be hotly debated. And I think they're doing the right things with him moving forward in 2020. But I'll be talking to you again soon. Happy holidays to everybody and enjoy.